Biggest story connected to college basketball this week, oddly, is the recruitment of Bronny James. That's the Kings' oldest son. On3 Sports reported that Oregon is the front runner, then LeBron James. That's the king. He jumped on Twitter and more or less said it's still way too early for there to be a front runner in the recruitment of Bronny James. USC, Ohio State, and Memphis are among the other schools reportedly involved to some sort of degree at this moment. Deadleg, are you ready to spend the next few months being asked about Bronny James recruitment? Because it looks like that's what we're in for.
Well, how about where we've landed, my man? After, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years of, I don't want to say insistence, but like continued belief that Bronny James would not play college basketball. Same thing kind of happened with Imani Bates. I believe the whole way Imani Bates would play college basketball, and he's going to play a lot of college basketball, by the way. Eastern Michigan upcoming for Imani Bates. There's a plot
can't wait. Can't wait for that.
Bronny James, while the route still exists for him to go and play in, G League or Overtime Elite, all these options are still out there. Still technically do it. If you talk to coaches who've seen him play, or people like Adam Finkelstein and others who have evaluated him for the better part of 3 years. I mean, I was in Vegas. I guess I watched, this is pre-pandemic. Were you in the gym with me when we watched Bronny James and LeBron was there? And it was like, I think he was a rising freshman. Were you at that? You might not have been there.
I might have been at Foothill.
You might, you know what? You might have been at Foothill. You really might have been in fact, I think you were at Foothill. Because when that game was played was also weirdly placed in the day. It wasn't like early afternoon. It wasn't evening. It was like 4:50 Vegas time. So you kind of had to go out of your way. But go out of my way I did to see him play. And point I'm getting to here is that Bronny James for a while has been, somewhat behind the scenes, like evaluated as though he was, like low level, high major player. Maybe like an A10 level player. Now, he got better and had a great July. And now he has gotten to a point where he's considered a viable top 75 prospect, high major prospect. And he has arrived at this point. Although there are still some who are a bit skeptical of that. And, if his name was not Bronny James and if it was, Chris Smith or whatever.
Or Matt Guster.
Or Matt Guster. That's right. Then he'd be nearly as highly ranked. But I do hope Bronny James does go play college basketball. It would obviously be nice to the sport if he were to do that. And with the way that the collective bargaining agreement with the NBA is right now and changing the age limit, if that even happens, he won't get in before the buzzer, so to speak, there. In regard to his recruitment, yeah, I mean, I did a little bit of sniffing around. In fact, the pod you were not on when I did with Finkelstein I was in Florida at the time when we basically wrapped up Peach Jam and everything like that. We got into Bronny James, and at the time I gave you 5 schools. And for the 5, the only one that I gave you at the time that doesn't seem to be viable right now is UCLA. And I did not have Memphis on the list. So swap Memphis for UCLA and the schools basically remain the same. But I was told that, as you would expect, the recruitment, very much being as controlled as you would expect it to be, and relatively low key. But to me, Bronny James basically amounts to college basketball's Arch Manning, the son of an absolute legend in the sport. I believe they're in the same high school class. I did not fact check that before this pod, but and whose recruitment will draw plenty of interest. We'll see whose college experience winds up being more impactful, Bronny James or Arch Manning. LeBron James.
I can answer that. I can answer that right now.
Okay. I actually don't know who you're going to say here.
Arch Manning. Arch Manning is a 5-star prospect recruited by literally everybody who is considered at one point.
Where's he playing?
Texas.
When's the last time Texas had an awesome NFL player?
I mean, I don't know.
I'm just saying.
Hey, if you want to do the Ion College Football podcast, go do that.
We have one. It's called Cover 3. I'm just saying I wouldn't because basketball is more of now quarterbacks. We get it. It's actually a good question there. If you're listening, feel free to chime in. Whose college career will be more impactful? Bronny James, basketball is more of an individualistic sport, or Arch Manning, where, the Texas thing is really what's got me tripped up on that, GP. That's all.
That's a terrible question. Arch Manning, Arch Manning is like elite level prospect, and as you pointed out, some people thought Bronny James was not necessarily a high major prospect. He is ranked 49th in the class of 2023, according to the top 247 rankings over at 24/7 Sports. And so last night, because this is like, you can roll your eyes at it if you want to. This is the biggest story in college basketball this week. It's a slow week. It's August, but like Bronny James, where is he going? Where is he not going? LeBron James addressing it on Twitter because On3 Sports called Oregon the leader. On3 Sports, by the way, they tend to they get some things. They get out over their skis a little bit, if you know what I mean.
Okay, do you want to start lobbing shots here?
No, I'm just saying there's been a handful of these where people have had to come out and say, On3 Sports reported, but it doesn't appear to be true.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's just true. I'm not taking shots at anybody. I'm just saying that's a true thing, and it appears to be another true thing that happened this week. So it's been a story this week, and particularly in the market that I live in, because it's been reported that Penny Hardaway is seriously pursuing Bronny James. There's LeBron grew up idolizing Penny. There's a Nike connection there. I can see how Memphis would be involved. I'm not certain that Memphis will close the deal, but I could see how Memphis would get involved. So with all this in mind, I just said, okay, let's forget his name's Bronny James for a second. Let's just label him the 49th best prospect in the class of 2023. What does that guy usually do in college? And after looking into it last night, not good.
You got some guys who are ranked 49th?
Yeah, well, I got the past 10 years.
Can I guess any of them?
You'll know some of these names. Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so the number 49 player, again, this is all according to the top 247. The number 49 player in 2002 is a young man named Isaac McNeely. He's headed to Virginia. Have you ever heard of Isaac McNeely?
Of course not.
Okay, he's going to Virginia. He hasn't played yet, so we're not counting him. But everybody else on this list played a freshman season in college. And I should point out that LeBron has certainly implied, if not straight said, that Bronny is going to be a one-and-done play. He's going to be in the 2024 NBA draft. That
he wants to play with his son, which is a whole other deal together. But yes, he wants to play with his son Bronny in the NBA before he retires.
So you're probably not getting a multi-year player here if you're a college coach. That doesn't seem to be the plan. If his name were Matt Guster, he'd certainly be labeled as a multi-year player. But his name's Bronny James. His dad wants to play with him. His dad has, again, suggested, you draft my son, I'll come play with you, which makes me think he will get drafted whether he should or not. Certainly, if that's on the table, he'll get drafted whether he should or not. So with all this in mind, I went back and looked at the past 10 players ranked 49th in the country, just like Bronny James, according to the top 247, and seeing what they did in their first year of college. And here's how it goes down. It actually starts, because we're going to count backwards. So class of 2021, number 49, this is actually a good one. Arthur Kaluma went to Creighton, averaged 10.4 points in 26.8 minutes per game as a freshman. He was Creighton's fifth leading scorer, but that's a good one. And you'll see how good that is as we go down the list. Number 49 in 2020 is somebody named Samson Ruhinsev.
Samsonite. I was way off.
Went to Florida. As a freshman, averaged 2 points, 7.4 minutes per game. 2019, number 49 player, Kai Jones, went to Texas. Averaged 3.6 points in 16.7 minutes per game as a freshman. Number 49 in 2018, A.J. Lawson. Pretty good one. Went to South Carolina, averaged 13.4 points in 30.5 minutes per game as a freshman. Team was 16-16, so he averaged double digits for a bad team. But he did average double digits. Number 49 in 2017, Jordan Nwora, Louisville. As a freshman, he got good, but as a freshman only averaged 5.7 points, 12 minutes per game. Number 49 in 2016, Schneider Herard. Went to
Little
Mississippi State.
Schneids. Yeah, Schneids. I'm getting, by the way, keep going. I'm getting like ridiculous deja vu at the moment. Very bizarre. Continue.
He averaged 5.1 points in 18.1 minutes per game as a freshman. Number 49 in 2014, the great Craig Victor, and went to Arizona, averaged 3.1 points, 7.1 minutes per game as a freshman. Number 49 in 2013, Matt Jones, went to Duke, averaged 1.8 points in 7.3 minutes per game as a freshman. Number 49 in 2012, another pretty good one here, Omar Calhoun, went to UConn, averaged 11.1 points in 32.1 minutes per game as a freshman. So the past 10 prospects ranked 49th in the top 247 at 24/7 Sports have combined to average 6.1 points in 17.7 minutes per game as a freshman. Only 30% of the past 10 prospects ranked 49th in the top 247 average more than 5.7 points per game as a freshman. You still want to recruit Bronny James, dead leg? Because here's my point. If I were a high major program, I'd be real hesitant to get seriously involved in this.
Oh, yeah. That's the other thing. I was thinking about this as I knew we were going to lead with this on the pod. There are certainly some benefits to this, obviously, from a publicity standpoint. You land Bronny James, your program is going to be talked about more than it normally would. That's just the reality of it. No matter where he goes, he will add that much more discussion and intrigue and attraction to your program. But you also bring in the most famous parent imaginable. And with that also comes an unnecessary amount or an invitation to an unnecessary amount of criticism. The reality here is, shy of Bronny James showing up to a college campus and becoming a top 40 player in the country. I'm not even saying All-America. I'm saying top 40 in the country. There will be a certain segment of the population, fan bases, maybe even some media, as irresponsible as that would be, that will find reasons to overly critique Bronny James for not being as good as maybe he should be or is supposed to be, given that he is literally LeBron James Jr. there. So if you are a power conference program and you are deciding to get into the Bronny James sweepstakes, you got to consider everything. It doesn't surprise me that Memphis wants to do this. If I was Bronny James and LeBron James, I would certainly look at the track record thus far with Penny Hardaway and have some level of hesitation with that. But what's the end game here? What's the benefit to doing this? I'll tell you this. I think that wherever he goes, I'll take the over on that, just because who he is, and I think the touches that he'll get. Mark me for over. What was it? 6.6 points a game. What was the average?
6.1. The past 10 players ranked 49th in their class have averaged 6.1 points in 17.7 minutes per game as a freshman.
Yeah, I'll say he'll best that as a freshman. I think he will. I think he'll average more points and be on the floor longer, which isn't to say that I think he's going to step in and be an immediate big time impact freshman or anything like that. But I do think that he will be more productive with that. But it'll be interesting. I think it is good for college basketball that he's going to play in the sport, or at least it seems that he is going to be playing in the sport. We are certainly headed in that direction. But as to which program would most benefit from this, I don't know. Oregon does feel like kind of a good fit. It's not, it's not a humongous program. It's not in a major media market. Obviously, you have the Nike ties there. There have been no shortage of big name prospects or high level prospects that have gone there in the past. So I'm not pinning them as the favorite. I don't have that intel. I'm not going to pretend that I do. But of all the places that he could potentially go, I would see why Oregon would make a lot of sense.
Again, if his name were something else and his father was somebody else, I would recruit him, no question. He's a top 50 player in the country. But given that LeBron has certainly suggested he's going to be in the 2024 NBA draft, this is not a player development thing. You're likely getting him for 1 year. My only question is, are you sure you want this for 1 year? Because once you get past the name and the fame, odds are Bronny James going to be a role player at best as a freshman in college. Based on the history of the number beside his name, he projects as somebody who probably shouldn't be getting major minutes for a legitimate high major program as a freshman. Why wouldn't you be hesitant to bring that into your program for a year? Again, LeBron suggests he's going to be in the 2024 NBA draft. So you're probably getting him for 1 year. And if you force play him in that 1 year, like play him even though it's clear he shouldn't be playing as much as he's playing, you're going to have locker room problems. Like Memphis had when Penny force played Imani Bates. Major minutes, even though he wasn't good and didn't deserve them. That's not a good scenario. And if you barely play Bronny James because, he was a borderline top 50 prospect coming into college and he doesn't need to be playing major minutes as a freshman at your program. Well, now you got Stephen A. Smith on ESPN on a random Wednesday morning talking about what's wrong with Bronny and whether it was a mistake for LeBron to let him go to your school. That's not good either. So are you sure you want to sign up for that if you're a coach? Like I said, and this is where the Arch Manning, Bronny James thing sort of falls apart. If Bronny were Arch Manning, like a 5-star prospect, let's say ranked second in the class of 2023, absolutely take him. But having a super famous, borderline top 50 prospect on your team who everybody thinks should be playing major minutes but probably shouldn't actually be is more likely to go wrong than right. Now, let me say this. Obviously, I can't see the future. It's possible Bronny James grows 2 inches over the next year, becomes a legitimate 5-star prospect, looks like somebody who can be the star of a college team as a freshman. If so, I'd love to have him if I were a coach. That sounds terrific. But if he's going to end up being what a typical player ranked in this range in his high school class, what they typically become as a freshman, if you take him, you're going to end up wishing maybe that you hadn't, which is why the smart move might be just to politely back off.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen, though, at this point. It feels like the schools that are involved are going to be the ones that remain involved. And again, this is wonderful for men's college basketball to have Bronny James on a trajectory where he is going to play in college. It seems that way. The idea, and this will be a discussion largely for once he gets into college, like the fact that we're talking about him in this regard, and he's a quality prospect, but guys who are ranked 49th, guys who are ranked 30th, guys who are ranked 25th don't project as one and done players. Whether or not he even gets drafted and how that aligns with LeBron and the Lakers, that's a whole other thing. There's going to be a lot of interesting ways this LeBron James Jr. story can develop and move along in the next couple of years here. I hope it works out for him as best as possible. And yes, from a coverage standpoint, it would be great if he continued to get better and stepped in and was a viable attraction and a producer, starter, one of the best freshmen in the country. We'd love that. But at this point, we'll see. Part of me comes from this, having seen him play. He's definitely a good player, but I've seen him play multiple games where it was beyond evident he was not the best player on the floor. Like at least 4 or 5 times I've seen him do that. And then with the coaches who have happened to see him even more than I do, they'll kind of tell you on background, from a rankings perspective, he just still seems a little bit overrated. And plus, there's just, how much more is he going to grow with stuff like that? Good player, but ultimately, yes, I think it will where he goes in terms of how he fits into a system and the coach that's there, I actually think is extremely important.
Yeah. Overtime elite might be an option for him. G League might be an option for him as well. So it's not settled that he's going to play in college. But I also think it's worth noting, because I know this might be you probably didn't start this podcast thinking I was going to say if I were a high major coach, I might not recruit Bronny James at all. Look at the schools that aren't recruiting him. I mean, that speaks for itself. Trust me when I tell you, there are plenty of coaches who would say, probably not publicly, but certainly privately, I don't want to get involved in this. It brings, and this isn't a reflection of Bronny James. I don't know Bronny James. He might be the best young man in the world. Somebody I'd like to have as my own son. This is just a reflection of he is super, super famous, literally millions of followers on social media. His games are on national television. Drake goes to them sometimes. He is a super famous college basketball prospect with a super famous father. And because of that, and because his father is like, I want to play with my son in the NBA, that implies his father's not going to be thrilled watching him play 14 minutes per game if that's the way this stuff goes down. I just think it's more likely to not go well than it is to go well if you end up enrolling him. Not because of anything with LeBron or anything with Bronny, but because of the circumstances connected to the situation. Again, players ranked where he's ranked are almost never impactful as freshmen at legitimate high major programs like Oregon, like USC, like Ohio State, like Memphis. Memphis had a freshman named Josh Minot last year, actually got drafted in the second round, signed a multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract in the NBA. Barely played at Memphis last season. Barely played. And because it was Josh Minot, nobody cared. But if Bronny James is barely playing for you, barely playing, buried on your bench, just because borderline top 50 guys don't normally make impacts at legitimate high major programs like the ones that are recruiting him, it's going to be something you're going to be asked about every day, something you're going to have to deal with every day. And I just don't think that's an easy situation.
Be interesting to see how this evolves and when the timeline will be for Bronny James to make his decision on his future. But that was certainly an unexpected plot development. But the podcast thanks Bronny James and everything, because it was certainly a worthy lead topic here in the thick of the offseason.